Good morning, everyone. Will you stay with me through a talk that might get harsh? How many of you will stay with me? Okay. All right. Many of you are attending here today because you heard me give the title of this talk last Sunday, The Transformation of President Trump. And if that piqued your curiosity, and you're here by virtue of the fact that you're curious to hear what it's going to be about, that's all well and good. But if you are here with a heartfelt clinging to the hope of this president, or any president, or any politician, you hope in vain. What you are hoping is in denial of the facts of life. What you are hoping is that selfish men and selfish women can fix the world. And more than that, you're hoping that selfish men and selfish women can somehow fix your world. And that is hoping in absolute vain. That is in complete denial of the facts of life. The facts of life regarding the world, clearly stated, cogently, very short, in this way, from the master of life. I have said this to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you have tribulation. But be of good cheer, I have overcome the world. And all of the teachings surrounding this are all about the overcoming of that world. And this is not a casual statement. That in the world you will have tribulation, no one is excluded from that statement and that truth. No one. It doesn't matter how much money you may have amassed, how popular you've become, how important, however you have guided your life, and whatever it is you have brought forth in your experience of life, you will still have and continue to have tribulation, difficulty, conflict, suffering, because you are not yet awake. And to be awake, you must first acknowledge the undeniable facts of life in the world in its initial state of consciousness. You see, our lives here are not about finding solace or completion in personality, in the single separate personality body consciousness. That's not what our lives here are about. Our lives here are about waking up from that. We're all born into it. We're raised in it, educated in it. But in the process of living, we should be awakening to the fact that it doesn't bring fulfillment. It cannot bring fulfillment. And for the most part, it brings more anxiety, more fear, more pain, more disease, more conflict, more separation, more war, more consternation. So we should be apprised of that. We should be waking up from that and realizing there has to be something else. And if you're ready for something else, then you'll have to listen without prejudice. You'll have to look without prejudice. Just for a few moments, consider what I'm going to share with you. This is from the modern-day master, Eckhart Tolle. From his books, Stillness Speaks, on page 15. The human mind, in its desire to know, understand, and control, mistakes its opinions and viewpoints for the truth. It says, This is how it is. You have to be larger than thought to realize that however you interpret your life or someone else's life or behavior, however you judge any situation, it is no more than a viewpoint, one of many possible perspectives. It is no more than a bundle of thoughts, but reality is one unified whole in which all things are interwoven, where nothing exists in and by itself. Thinking fragments reality. It cuts it up into conceptual bits and pieces. It cuts it up into the illusion of there's me and there's all that is not me. There's me and there's all that is not me. That false definition of life is the underlying cause of mankind's inhumanity to mankind. All that we call sin in the world, that is the underlying cause of all inhumanity to inhumanity to inhumanity down through the ages, and it is the underlying sin of man's inhumanity unto himself. That's simply the truth. And knowing that is the beginning of awakening. And the beginning of awakening is necessary for us to find life and find the abundant life promised by the masters down through the ages. So I'm going to share a story with you. You know what? I think I might read this to you again, because if you don't get anything else out of this talk, you have to know this. Whatever it is you came in here thinking, whatever you came expecting, this is more true than any of it. The human mind, in its desire to know, understand, and control, mistakes its opinions and viewpoints for the truth. It says, this is how it is. You have to be larger than thought to realize that however you interpret your life or someone else's life or behavior, however you judge any situation, it is no more than a viewpoint, one of many possible perspectives. It is no more than a bundle of thoughts, but reality is one unified whole in which all things are interwoven, where nothing exists in and by itself. Thinking fragments reality, it cuts us up into conceptual bits and pieces that lead to every illusion man is plagued by. There's a book called Mount Analog. It was published in 1959. It may not be around these days, I don't know. But that book tells a story about an expedition. It's written by a mountain climber who climbed most of the great mountains in the world. And he had the benefit of viewing the world from the tops of the greatest mountains, the vista, and it was breathtaking, and it was beautiful. But he knew, even in completing that tremendous achievement of scaling all these mountains, that it was not completely fulfilling. There had to be something else. There had to be something more. There had to be something greater, something more beautiful that we were heirs to. Something inside him said that. And so he began to seek, to find a place where one could actually discover that which would bring true meaning and fulfillment into his or her life. And he created an expedition of great, well thought through people. He created an expedition of 8 people to try to find this place. And he had, with these 8 people, researched all of the currents and everything in the world. He knew it was a place that we couldn't see, because no human beings would be there, because no human beings were in his lifetime or any lifetime ever fulfilled. And there was always the war and the hate and the disease and the pain. So they knew they were looking for a place you couldn't see. So they studied the currents of the world. And in studying them and researching them, they discovered certain currents in the China South Sea were irregular. Something was wrong there. Something was different. And so they were going to sail there and see if they could discover there might be something there even though you can't see it. And so they took their expedition with all their supplies on their yacht and they sailed to this place. And by virtue of a very kind wind, they were able to move through the curvature of time into the continent of Mount Analog. And on this continent, there's a great mountain. It goes up through the sky. And it has great, great peaks all the way up along the way, great ledges. And it is everybody's desire to get to the peak of that mountain. And as they pulled in to the port of this unseen continent that they now saw, this port had ships from every period in history sitting there, rotting away with barnacles on it, going to waste, just laying there in port. It was over. They had an expedition had come and the ships stayed there. And whoever went on, they went on to try to climb that mountain. And some didn't climb the mountain. They felt it would be too difficult because it's not a mountain that you could climb in a day or a month. It would be a mountain that would take at least a couple of years to climb because you had to set up your supplies and do things in such a way, and you had to follow the law of the mountain, which were given by the guides who ran everything on the continent of Mount Analog. They were the guides, and they were in charge. And there were those people down below in the ports that they sold goods and they made items and they did everything else. They made food and all that stuff. And you could buy things there that you needed for your journey, and you could buy things that you needed to live before you made your journey. But it was made up of the people who either never attempted to climb the mountain because they realized they couldn't make it. They were defeated by their own beliefs. Or it was populated by the people that tried to climb the mountain and couldn't make it and had to come back. And when this expedition got there, their money wasn't any good. You're talking about expeditions that had been there from the beginning of time and had been settled by people there. And then they had children, and some of their children who were hopeful they'd climb the mountain. Some of them did, and some of them didn't. Some of them were held back by the fact that the mothers and fathers needed to cling to their child. They needed to have him around or her around, and she couldn't let it go or he couldn't let it go. So he stayed down below, and even though his heart and his desire was to try to climb the mountain, he or she never did. But when you got there, the guides gave you currency. They gave you tokens that you could use to spend and buy whatever you needed in the stores and the areas of supply there at the base of Mount Analog. So they had these tokens. And the only way you could ever pay back the guides, which you had to pay back, was that while you were climbing and going through this journey to get to the top of this mountain, you would find these perfect crystals, if you could. They were hard to find because they were hard to see. And they were always located in really precarious places to even be, and crevasses down below where you had to risk your life to dig one out of the ice. They were called paradams. They were harder than diamonds and more beautiful. But to even see one, you had to listen to it. You had to need it. Absolutely. Because it only shone to you like this quick sparkle in a drop of dew, in a dewdrop. You'd only see it momentarily, but that's if you really needed it. And so if you collected these, you could pay the guides back for the tokens you received. And if you never paid it back, what you had to do is you had to go back to work in the base ports, the ports that surrounded Mount Analog. And then you had to become one of the people that just do these things every day. You do a trade or you do a service to pay back the gift that you received that would have allowed you to climb this mountain. Anyway, the expedition made up of a scientist who researched anomalies, a botanist, a linguist, a symbologist, an artist, a historian that knew everything about history, a religion person who understood everything about religion and spiritual practices as a researcher, and also the author himself, who was the great mountain climber. And he would keep the log. He would keep writing for the journey. Now, while they were in this base location, before they got to the first level, their base camp, they had to get all ready and supplied, and they had to make sure the weather was going to be right and all of this. But while they were there, they became so interested in the different linguistics in that port. It was kind of like French, the language, but it had all of these different idioms that were in it, and even new words and phrases and ways to say things. The botanists found plants that were not located any place in the world, that did strange things, interesting, amazing things. And then so on and so forth. Each one of these people, these experts, became so involved in this new, incredibly interesting stuff that they wanted to write about and research. And then they were involved in this whole thing, and one of the guides said to them, "Are you ever going to make the climb?" Just passing by their window, that's all he did. He walked by and he said, "Are you ever going to make the climb?" And they realized that the intellectual prowess that they had brought from the world, that they always thought was going to bail them out, that actually they used to try to figure out how to get to Mount Analog and all of this, the intellect, was there to defeat them. They had to step beyond it. They had to step beyond their own self-importance, or they would have been stuck there. So they set out and say, "We have to go," and we have to go the very next day. And so they set out and they hired some porters to take some of their stuff up to the first level, the first plateau. And as they climbed and got there, they saw so many different things, marvelous things. They even saw way in the distance, further up from them, they saw a herd of unicorns galloping by. And so they were inspired. But you see, the guides made very clear to them that all along the way up this mountain, there will be things that you will have to do. There will be rules you will have to abide by, and you must never break them. It's not like the world you came from, where you break the rules all the time, and the consequences aren't that grave, and so you remain in your illusion and you continue to break the rules. But you see here, if you do that, you're done. And there's a place on the journey up where you have to let go of all the things that you felt were unnecessary. There were lots of things they took along that they would thought for their comforts and stuff like that. But then they realized, we're never going to make it if we carry all this stuff, so they have to leave it behind. And then they got to a certain place in the climb where they realized even the things they thought were necessary, they were going to have to leave behind. You see, they knew that this mountain was the highest one that will ever be climbed, and that they would need oxygen, canisters of oxygen. But they recognized they'll never be able to recharge those canisters of oxygen up at those peaks because it'll be over. It's going to take years to get there, and they'll never be able to use the oxygen anyway. They had to leave it behind. They had to leave it behind because they came to understand that you cannot get to the top of this mountain unless you adapt. You're going to have to adapt to the changes as you go up. The higher you get, the more adapting you're going to have to become. You're going to have to become so adaptable as you go up that there will be hardly any thought of yourself. There'll only be the recognition of you and all that is magnificent, all that is beautiful to behold, all that is a gift. And you are there as this tiny, intricate part of it to do whatever little good you can do in the small moment of your existence in the gift. That was the way it went on Mount Analog. And the expedition was never completed. See, I hope you know that here, every one of us are on that journey somewhere. We might still be outside that port, or we might be in that port town, or we might be somewhere on the base of that mountain. But this you should know if you don't take anything away from this. Everyone is on the journey, whether he or she knows it or not. And you're on the journey whether you want to be or not. You know why? Because the mind, your understanding, is always evaluating your situation. Always evaluating your situation. And you know what it wants? It wants to be happy. It wants to find fulfillment. It wants to know what the meaning of its existence is all about. It wants to actually experience beauty so grand that it will burst open its illusions and free it to live free in every given beautiful, gifted moment of life. That's what's within us. That's what we're seeking. And so many of us have settled to remain down below in that port town, doing our trade, carrying on our thing, being conned by the illusions of the world. But here they are, they took the trip. And you know why they never finished the expedition? Because the writer of Mount Analog, the book, died at his typewriter at age 36. The sentence, he has one sentence he didn't finish. And it's the final sentence of a story about one of the porters who grew up in the continent of Mount Analog. He grew up there, but he hung around because his mother and father clung to him, wouldn't let him go and wouldn't let him try. But when he got to be about 35 and they were gone, he went to do the climb. And he went up so far and he got to the place where he was really inspired. And so he set out on his own and thought his expedition would catch up to him. He set out on his own. And what they had to do on Mount Analog, every time you go to a particular base camp and you're going ready to move on, you have to clean up everything. You have to make it perfect and beautiful for the next expedition to come up behind you. Not only that, when you go up a little further, however high you get up, you have to send somebody back with written information about what the difficulties and the things you ran into to try to help them on their journey. So you had to do all that. That's why it took years to move all this equipment this way and that way until finally you have to get to the place where what the mountain is saying to you, you will either adapt or you will never go beyond this point. And he got to a certain point where there was no hunting anymore and got caught in a blizzard. And for 3 days he was there without food, huddled up underneath these quilts. And when the sun started to come out, he came out and he was starving. And he saw a rock rat. And he took a rock and he crushed its head. A rock rat is something between a field mouse and a gopher. And he crushed it and he ate it. And then he caught up with his expedition and thought he was going to go on. And the guide said to him, "No. you in an area where there's no hunting. There's no killing there. So now you have to go back for 3 years, back down to the port town, and find your way, make your way. But you're going to have to make amends and replace what you have taken. So he goes back and he raises a rock rat. But it takes him 3 years before he can actually go on an expedition again. But before he goes before the council of the guides on Mount Analog. And they tell him, you're going to replace this, but you should take a look at what you have done. And he just takes a short way out into the mountain and sees that entire half of this huge, sloping, giant mountain just has come down over all the different paths that lead to the top of Mount Analog. He has stopped so many expeditions because of that one rat that he killed. That rock rat. What it's about. And the guides explain to him, the rock rat lives on wasps that gather honey from the flowers. And they carry on the pollen that fertilizes the flowers, and the flowers go on and create these other things, and plants grow and create roots inside the mountainside. And it holds the mountain together. And 3 years ago, when you took that rock rat, you see, what it happens to a rock rat is it gets too old to catch the flying wasps. So he has to eat the ones that are sick and are crawling along the ground. They have a disease. They're infirm. And he eats them. And it keeps things in balance the way it should be. But you took that rock rat, and now the wasps all got those diseases and couldn't fly anymore, couldn't pollinate the flowers, and couldn't keep the growth of plants that held the earth together. So you brought it all out of balance until finally the mountain fell down, half of it. And so he actually winds up, because he has to make repayment for that, he loses another 7 years. 10 years are taken away from him for that. And so here we are. And we are at the beginning of the journey. This is a beautiful symbolic journey of what we are actually on. And some people spend a long time without ever supposing that their perception may only be their perception, their own personal collection of beliefs that they feel are absolute and correct. But the Master of Life has always been in denial of that. Judge not that you be not judged, for the judgment you pronounce, you will be judged. And the measure you give will be the measure you get back. Judge not that you may not be judged, for with the judgment you pronounce, you will be judged. And the measure you give will be the measure you get back. And A Course in Miracles is trying to inform us of our situation on this journey. You see, the rat that man killed, that porter killed, in an area where the rule was you can't hunt here anymore. As you grow spiritually and expand spiritually, you know, you don't do things because the law says you have to do this. There's a penalty if you don't do it. You do it because you've awakened to the fact that you are part of this grand, one, beautiful, whole called life. And you want to be considerate of it in every possible way. And so, this man is like every man, every woman, every person who says, listen to it, you're about to kill the rat in your mind when I say this. It's going to be painful for some of you. Because you are saying to yourself, I can't recycle. I haven't got the time, I'm too busy. That's it. You're done. Get back down. You're not in it. You're not open. You're still living the lies. You think some politician's going to bail out the world? You're not in it. You have to go back. You have to live down below. And if you want to live there, you can live there as long as you want. But you'll live in conflict, you'll live in suffering, you'll live in pain, you'll live in disease, you'll live in fear. You'll live in exploitation. You'll live in laziness. And of course, in Miracles, says it this way about the beginning of our journey from the workbook, page, well, it's actually lesson 18. Perception has a focus. It is this that gives consistency to what you see. Change but this focus, and what you behold will change accordingly. Your vision now will shift to give support to the intent which has replaced the one you held before. Remove your focus on your brother's sins, and you experience the peace that comes from faith in sinlessness. This faith receives its only sure support from what you see in others past their sins. For their mistakes, if focused on, are witnesses to sins in you, and you will not transcend their sight or the sight of sin and see the sinlessness that lies beyond. So I honestly share with you, there is a level of awareness on which others are living. It is higher on the mountain. It is their duty to try to the best of their ability to share what they have found going up the mountain. But each and every person is required to make the climb himself or herself. And it begins with understanding this truth. And others are on their way up this mountain. And so somebody said today in the group discussion, which we'll have after this particular session, someone said, life is hard. In those exact words, you know that Sylvester Stallone, the actor, at the height of his career was doing an interview. And he said to the interviewer, life is hard. Such an amazing thing for him to say. He's a multimillionaire at the time. He could do anything, have anything, go anywhere, literally anything. He owned villas in France and stuff like that. And he said, life is hard, because he was still operating on the level of personality and not on the level of open-hearted consideration, kindness, and awareness that there is, all of it is only God waiting for you.